Keep it up, Gavin. 100 grams.
I like my water with lemon and lime. That's cause they're better combined. Kinda like us, you and I. If you were fruit, you'd be a fine apple. If you were word, you'd be the fine print. I like the drama and the time travel, so you could walk by me and yeah, I think escape, I need an ice drink. I see your face whenever I blink. You a Pisces, kinda sweet like the iced tea. Southern kind, never undermine. Never put your dreams under mine. We a team, anything. Heard me sing like a bunch of times. Just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, man, it turned into a butterfly. I like my water with lemon and lime. That's cause they're better combined. Kinda like us, you and I like my water with lemon and lime. That's cause they're better combined. Kinda like us, you and I. If you were fruit, you'd be a fine apple. If you were word, you'd be the fine print. I like the drama and the time travel, so you could walk by me again. If you were fruit, you'd be a fine apple. If you were word, you'd be the fine print. I like the drama and the time travel, so you could walk by me again. And you watch Game of Thrones on your phone for like the 100th time. I don't know what you want, but baby, give me a try. No reason for you to be alone. Don't make it difficult, just tell me what you want. Yeah. Be right back when I get there for you. Only take a minute, baby, I support you. And I can't lie, baby, kinda want more. If you were fruit, you'd be a fine apple. If you were words, you'd be the fine print. I like the drama and the time travel, so you could walk by me again. If you were fruit, you'd be a fine apple. If you were words, you'd be the fine print. I like the drama and the time travel, so you could walk by me again.
Take a look around the room. Love comes wearing disguises. How to go about choose. Break it down by shapes and sizes. I'm a man who's got very specific taste. You're just my type. Oh, you got holes in you, I believe. You're just my type. Oh, I think it's time to leave. You're just my type. When there's loving in the air, don't fight it, just keep breathing. I can't help myself but stare. Double check for double meanings. I'm a man who's got very specific taste. You're just my type. Oh, you got holes in you, I breathe. You're just my type. Oh, I think it's time to leave. You're just my type. breathing. Yeah, you're just my type. Oh, I think it's time to begin. Yeah, you're just my type.
Billboard, baby, do a leap and make them dance when they come on. Everybody looking for a dance floor to run on.
If you wanna run away with me, I know a galaxy and I can take you for a ride. I had a premonition that we fell into a rhythm where the music don't stop for life. Glitter in the sky, glitter in my eyes, shining just the way I like. If you're feeling like you need a little bit of company, you met me at the perfect time. You want me, I want you, baby. My sugar boo, I'm levitating. The Milky Way, we're renegading. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got you, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. You, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating.
I'm one of the greatest, ain't no debating on it. I'm still levitated, I'm heavily medicated. Ironic, I gave him love and they end up hating on me. She told me she loved me and she been waiting. Been fighting hard for your love and I'm running thin on my patience. Needing someone to hug, even took it back to the basics. You see what you got me out here doing? Might have threw me off, but can't nobody stop the movement. Let's go. Left foot, right foot, levitating. Pop stars, do a leap with the baby. I had to lace my shoes for all the blessings I was chasing. If I ever slip, I fall into a better situation. So catch up, go put some cheese on it, get out and get your bread up. They always leaving you far, but you run together. Weight of the world on my shoulders, I kept my head up. Now baby, stand up, cause girl, you
want me, I want you, baby. My sugar boo, I'm levitating. The Milky Way, we're renegading. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got you, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. You, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. You can fly away with me tonight. You can fly away with me tonight. Baby, let me take you for a ride. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm levitating. You can fly away with me tonight. You can fly away with me tonight. Baby, let me take you for a ride. Yeah, 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 yeah. My love is like a rocket with your blast off, and I'm feeling so electric, that's so awesome. And even if I wanted to, I can't stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. My love is like a rocket with your blast off, and I'm feeling so electric, that's my ass off. And even if I wanted to, I can't stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. You want me, I want you, baby. My sugar boo, I'm levitating. The Milky Way, we're renegading. I got you, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. You can fly away with me tonight. You can fly away with me tonight. Baby, let me take you for a ride. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm levitating. You can fly away with me tonight. You can fly away with me tonight. Baby, let me take you for a ride. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got you, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating.
Doesn't this guitar sound so good? So sweet.
Living in this big blue world with my head up in outer space. I know I'll be A-O-A-OK. I know I'll be A-O-A-OK. When I see trouble come my way, I'll be making lemonade. I know I'll be A-O-A-OK. I know I'll be A-O-A-OK.
Hey little lady, I know you're feeling crazy. All your other friends are busy making them babies. Been out in the real world, don't like how it's tasting. Let me change your mind with my little old saying. 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? Put some sugar in my water, cause we making Minute Maid. Fuck all the hate, do a shimmy shake. Throw a middle finger up down the interstate.
Living in this big blue world with my head up in outer space. I know I'll be A-O-A-OK. I be A-OK. When I see trouble come my way, I be making lemonade. I know I be A-OK. I know I be A-OK. I'd be lying if I said I knew the way. I just eat shit and pretend that it's gourmet. I've had terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days. But I'm a G, can't you see that I will always be A-OK. A-OK. I'm gonna be A-OK. You gonna be A-OK. We gonna be A-OK. Living in this big new world, with my head up in outer space. I know I'll be A-OK. I know I'll be A-OK. When I see trouble come my way, I'll be making lemonade. I know I'll be A-OK. I know I'll be A-OK.
Okay, now. Can anyone hear me now? Cool, perfect. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, welcome everyone back to another Xplore event. It's been a while since our last one. We took a bit of a pause for the exam season. Let everyone catch up with exams. Obviously, we're all students as well who organize these events. So we had quite a few exams set up, but we're back. We're going to have a few events before basically the end of the year. We want to try and get a few more cool things out of the DSC this year. And we're here with Xplore UX. And basically, as we all know, Xplore is a series where we all explore different versions, different technologies, different paths that you can take in the world of technology. And UX is highly requested since the beginning of this year. Now, we wanted to make sure we got someone who was very good at UX and not one of us who had to quickly learn it. So we decided to actually invite a guest speaker who is an ex-Brunel student. So we'll invite her to stage shortly. However, let's just quickly go over how this event will work. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of this event. And just please keep your questions towards the end. If you have any major questions you want answered then and there, you can put it throughout the event. There'll be some like demonstrations and stuff like that. So if you need a recap, just let us know in chat and we can arrange that. And the Q&A will happen in the chat at the end. So you won't have to go to another application. You can do everything here. But yeah, so just please make sure you keep all the questions towards the end of the event. It will make the whole Q&A a lot smoother. Anyway, now I want to invite Apurva to the stage. Hello.
Hey, hi.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, perfect. So do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah. So hi everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Apurva. I'm a digital service designer, and I've been in the field for about 5 years now. I've worked both as a UX and UI designer, and I think I can safely say that I enjoy UX a lot more than I do UI. And I also enjoy photography, and I do a bit of digital art when I'm free, in my free time. So yeah, that's me.
Cool, perfect. Now I'm going to give you the whole stage. I'm going to be backstage and let you know if anything happens, if you need anything. But yeah, so
okay. So what I'm going to introduce today, or today's session, is essentially about an introduction to UX and UI design. So if we get into that today, what I'm going to be speaking about in this presentation is I'm going to introduce UX and UI. I'm going to talk about how it's different from each other, what are the underlying rules that make them do different things, however, they're essentially something that goes hand in hand, what the process of UX is. So basically, user research, UI design, how do you get that research, that data into something that you can actually use in terms of analysis and patterns that you can identify in that research, and then apply that to your designs, apply that to your wireframes, prototype that, and at the end of it, do user testing and then get feedback from users. I'm also going to be talking about applying UX strategy and conducting UX research. So basically how UX strategy informs how the entire product is developed and how UX research is conducted based on the strategy that we've selected in the beginning of the project. I'm also going to be briefly demoing some wireframing and prototyping on Figma. So if you guys have that installed, maybe, hopefully, at the end of this, you guys will also have a prototype with you. I'm also going to briefly introduce user testing, and interface design on Figma will be the very last thing. So it will be about 3 screens of hi-fi designs, and I'm going to be showing you how those are connected and how those sort of work on Figma. So let's get started. So what exactly is UX and what it's not? So according to NNG, which is Nielsen-Norman Group, their formal definition of what UX is UX encompasses all aspects of users' interaction with the company, its services and products. It's very formal, a definition, but simply put, it's basically any touch point of the user with a product or a service, either outside of using it or within using it, or outside after it's been used. So essentially, take a scenario where you've got a fitness app that you want to build. You think it's going to change the face of fitness apps in the market, and this is something that you want to release. So you've built it, you've got this product now with you. How are you going to let your users know that it exists? Because they have no idea, right? So all the points before they use this product, as to awareness, as to discovery, how are they going to know this exists? How are they going to be interested to download that app or subscribe to some service of it? All of this comes before using the app, and that's essentially a touch point that we have to think about. Then it comes where there's UX within using the app. How easy is that app to use? Is it easy to navigate through? Does it let me achieve the goals that I have? Does it let me do the things that I expected this app to allow me to do? So all of that is the UX within using the app. Going back to using the app, going back to UX outside the app. So once you've created awareness, they know that it exists, they've used the app, there also comes UX afterwards, which is feedback. So for example, you might make certain hypothesis, which is then proved with user research that this is the most ideal solution. You've implemented that. Not necessary that that is always right. So basically, UX goes all the way even after that. So it's a long process. It doesn't end by releasing the application. Essentially, it's all throughout. So that's essentially what this definition means. It encompasses all aspects of the user's interaction, so with that product or with that service. What UX is not now. It's very commonly misunderstood as design thinking. So design thinking is a non-linear method to finding solutions to problems by iterating different solutions, sending them out for feedback, testing it, seeing if it works, and then fixing it if it doesn't. Now, though this may sound very similar to UX, UX is the very same thing that we just spoke about. It's finding a solution to a problem, testing it, but more in the context of the user. So there is a problem, there's a solution, and how do you find that solution to that problem? That's design thinking. But if there's a user who's going to be using that solution, that's UX. Thinking about that user, their context, their pain points, their motivations, their needs in using that solution or while using that solution. That's where UX comes in. So it's not design thinking, however, they work hand in hand. It's very much core to UX. So that's one of the first misconceptions about design thinking in UX. The second is UX is not about assumptions and designing with your gut. It's very fact-based, data-based. There's very clear analysis, clear data that informs your UX decisions. You, as a UX designer, you cannot say, I think this may work. It has to be proven with some sort of data that proves that, or some sort of interviews or surveys or things that you've conducted in terms of user research that will validate that assumption or that claim. So that's one of the other things that UX is not. And the third thing to me is that UX is not about making things look pretty. That's UI design. UX is more about usability. It's about how it can be used, how effectively it solves a certain problem, how effectively it can give a solution to a certain problem. And it's not about how good it looks. It may just be shades of gray. And as long as it's usable, as long as it provides a very usable solution, that's good UX. That's UX. Now, given all of this, what exactly is the role of a UX designer? Given what I've just spoke about, it's easy to assume that I'm going to find a solution to this existing problem. I'm going to mold it, morph it in the context of the user, and that's just what the UX designer does. I would say yes and no, because although they do that, there's another aspect of a UX designer's role, which is they have to think about business goals. They have to think about business requirements, business analysis. Essentially is what's done. A business has certain requirements. They, for example, if they release a product, there has to be something that the business gains from that product. If, as a UX designer, we only think about the user, that does not benefit the business in some way. If the business does not exist, therefore, the solution may not exist. And if that happens, the problem still persists, right? So given that situation, there has to be sort of like a middle ground that the UX designer has to find. So a UX designer's role is very much finding that harmonious line in between user goals and business goals and trying to see what's the best way to merge both of these. What's the best way to make a solution that works for both sides? A role of the UX designer is also to essentially humanize technology. So a lot of the times technology has its own way of working. And when back in the day when UX was not a thing, technology was designed, it was released, and humans had to really work hard to understand that technology. Today, UX says that that's not how it should be. Technology has to work for the user, for the human, as opposed to the other way around. So that's essentially one other thing that UX designers do in their role. And the last thing is a UX designer's role does not begin with the project and end with the project. It goes much before, where we have things like UX strategy, and I'll come to that in a bit, where you apply different kinds of analysis and logic to see whether this product is really needed, or is it just going to be another thing that floats around in the market? What problem is it solving? What gap is it filling? Then looking at the product itself, and then going much after and seeing that whoever you've designed this for, are they really benefiting from this? Are they being helped in some way, essentially? So it's a long process. It goes all the way through, and that's essentially what a role of a UX designer is. So what I'm going to get into now is the process of how UX is actually done. So it starts off with UX strategy, and this starts way before a project is even thought of. So it's essentially the bread and butter of anyone in a higher post of UX. So that would be a chief experience officer or head of UX or UX directors. But it's essentially what they do. However, it's nice as a UX designer to know these things because it sort of informs your design decisions, because you may be very ambitious in your solutions. It may be that you want to create the best app there is out there, but you have to consider the availability of resources that you have. You have to consider limitations or things like budget constraints and things like that. If you allow those things to inform the way the trajectory of your designs go, it will sort of avoid, unexpected errors or unexpected deadline delays and things like that. So the idea of UX strategy is, if this is considered, basically, if you allow UX strategy to inform the way the development cycle goes of a certain project, you can very easily find that balance, as I said before, between user and business goals. So maybe, for example, in a scenario, users have a certain kind of requirement where there's a problem and they require a solution which is very expensive to design, right? As a business, what we have to do is find that middle ground where it's affordable for the business to design as well as it would be usable to the user. If we go ambitious as designers with very crazy ideas which are not feasible, or if we put in a lot of effort, a lot of time and effort into developing a feature that may be very minuscule in the grand scheme of things, that might really not be the best solution. So essentially, UX strategy helps understand this way before the project is even commenced or even started, right? Now, why essentially is it good to know this? So putting it more in simple terms, it's you need to know the what, the why, and the how. So if you look at it in a situation, or if you look at it as a digital product is a house, that's your product. The question is, why are you building it? What is it going to solve? How is this product going to help anyone? What problem is it going to solve? What gap is it going to fill? Things like that. Once you have that sorted, once you know exactly what this product is going to do, it comes down to how are you going to do this. You have to consider all the constraints, the availability of resources. Even humans are a resource, right? Who's going to be building this? Who's going to be designing this? How many of these resources do you have given the time frame that you have? So these things essentially allow you to cut down extra features. It avoids feature creep. It allows you to sort of make it a very concise product that you would need to essentially fit that gap that needs to be filled. So that's essentially the need of UX strategy. And at the end, as it is, there's a lot of convincing with the stakeholders all along the way. It's basically UX designers trying to convince the stakeholders on this side that any sacrifice made here has a very strong outcome on the other side, which is the user side. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiation, but at the end of the day, when the balance is found, it's very rewarding. So the first step, once you have your strategy in place, you know exactly what you're going to do. The first step is user research. So it's basically understanding who you're designing for and whether you're designing what they need as opposed to what you think they need. So many a times we have an idea of what a certain gap is in a market. Knowing what exactly that gap is in terms of where the pain points are, that's what user research facilitates. So there are a few steps to do this. First of all, it's the objectives, which is we're looking for answers to the 5 W's: the who, the what, when, where, why, and how. The who is when you ask the question who, it determines who your audience is, who are you designing for. It also helps understand who you're going to recruit as participants in the future for user testing, because they essentially have to match the personas that you are looking to design for, or the people that you're looking to design for. The next is the what. So the what is what these people might be actually doing when they're using your product. So when they're on your website or on your service or on a platform, why are they there? What are they going to do? Knowing what they're there for, primarily at least, would help you design the thing in a way that that's the foreground and everything else is background. Otherwise, when there's too much noise, even the user will get confused as to where they are, what they're doing, what they're actually there for, right? The third is when. Knowing when is at what time of day or point in their routine are they going to be using this thing. Is it before bed? Is it after they wake up? Is it midday, or is it to complete a certain requirement? Maybe it could be ordering coffee, for example. That would be either midday or in the evening. It's good to know at what times they're going to be using this. The other is where. Where is determining the context of use. So are they going to be using this in their houses? Are they going to be using this at a workplace? Or is this technology something that needs them to physically come to a certain place to be able to use it? For example, a kiosk. So knowing the environment in which it's going to be used is also very important in designing the product. The other question is why. Why in terms of their emotional motivation, or their motivations and emotional state as to why they're using this product. What is it that's causing them to come and use the product? Is there some problem that they're trying to solve? Is there a goal that they want to achieve? Is there a task they want to complete? So essentially all of this adds to the why of user research. And the last is how. How is very straightforward. It's how are they going to complete that task? If they want to, say, post something to a certain location, how are they going to complete that task? It's pretty much just that. In the digital world, if it's in a way, it's saying, I want to transfer funds from this place to that place. How am I going to do it? The different steps taken to do that. Either it's open your app, do the things in that, send it, or it's go to the certain place, use the kiosk, do the things that you need to do, send it. So that's essentially what the how does. Once you have your 5 Ws ready, the next thing you need to do is hypothesis. Basically sit and list out all the things that you think you know. It's basically the presumptions, the assumptions, all the past biases or thoughts that you would expect that they would need in this situation, or this thing would solve. All of those are usually listed out under hypothesis. After hypothesis comes methods. Now, just because we have a whole list of hypotheses and things that we think would work, that doesn't mean we go on and start a design based on that. The next step, methods, essentially is selecting a bunch of methods that will validate whether these hypotheses are right or wrong. So there's a whole range of things that you can do. There's interviews, there's surveys, open-ended surveys, there's qualitative, quantitative kind of methods where you send out surveys to a massive group of people, and that's essentially quantitative. It's about majority wins. Whoever says this is the best, that's the one you choose. Or you have qualitative, where it's more about one-to-one. It's about how do you feel about this, or what do you think about this. That's essentially more one-to-one, more about how they feel, what they think, what's their behavior, what's the motivation behind them doing something or doing what they do. So there are many methods that you can choose from. You have to choose the ones that apply best to your need, because not everything will work, and having everything doesn't justify, it doesn't mean that you will find the ideal solution. You have to filter down the methods that you've listed out. Using these methods, the next one is conduct. So now say, for example, you have a bunch of methods, you've chosen about 5 that's going to work for you. The next is to start conducting the research using these 5 methods. And the last is to synthesize. Synthesize is essentially finding answers to those research questions, which is in objectives, the 5 Ws. If you can find answers to those questions, if you can find new information which was not there as part of your hypothesis, if you find many of your hypotheses were proved wrong, these are good things, because if there's no change, if you found nothing different from what you've hypothesized, then there's something going wrong with either how you've conducted it, or the methods that you've chosen, or the hypothesis itself does not relate to the objective probably, or the objectives that you've chosen are somehow not closely related to the problem. So there is something that's going wrong in one of the 4 above if the synthesized data does not show anything new. You have to be looking for new information. So that's essentially an overview of what user research is and how that's done. So once you have all this data and you have all this analysis done, it's just facts, right? It's a bunch of facts. It's black and white. It's cold. There's no empathy over there. So what you do is you create personas. They're fictional characters, and they represent the type of users that you have, and you put these problems in their context. So you may have maybe 10, 15 personas, but the most ideal range is usually 2 or 5. You shouldn't go beyond that, because you can't include all of these personas. You have to have a certain target audience that you're looking at. And personas are not very granular. They're more high level. So you might somehow cover 3-4 personas from your list of 10 within one. So that's one of the things that you should keep in mind. The second thing a persona does is it humanizes your research. For example, as we see here, Samantha Jones, right? You have given her a story. She's a newly married Italian woman living in London. She's got a whole story. She's got goals which relate to her and briefly relate to the theme of what project we are looking to do. So she's got motivations, she's got frustrations. So this sort of makes you empathize with her. What exactly is her problem, as opposed to saying it as, oh yeah, this person, I have to design for this person, right? And then what happens is when you have a bunch of personas, you realize the different needs of different types of people, because you are putting them in a very real scenario. You're creating a very real human in your persona. So then you can see different user needs, different motivations, different goals, different tasks, things like that. And you can start to ask questions in the context of your users. So say, for example, the question is, do I really need this feature? Instead of saying, do I really need this feature, which may just be a yes or no, based on how you feel about how strongly you feel about the feature, it would help to ask, does this persona need this feature? Does this feature really solve some sort of problem for this persona or in their scenario? And then there are different types of personas. There's role-based personas, there's goal-directed personas, there's engaging personas. So role-based personas is more about what task it's about their role in that particular scenario. What role are they playing in that scenario for which you're designing, or how is it going to help them essentially? You have goal-directed personas where you have a certain task that you're looking to do. That task needs to be completed, and that's what this persona is for. So there are different ways of looking at your personas. And the last one is more engaging. Engaging is sort of like a hybrid between the first two, where designers nowadays make the personas very 3D, very, very human-like, and there are very extensive stories given to that. But ideally, we tend to stick with either the first two or a more lean version of engaging personas, because many a times projects don't have very vast budgets and time availability, right? And then the last is, when you have created these personas, given that they're high level, given that they sort of cover a few personas in your list, if there are matching requirements or matching frustrations, somewhere you can see a pattern or similarity, you know that given the personas that you've chosen, the 5 or 4 that you've chosen, if there are commonalities between them, that means those are very important features. You have to focus on those features in your product. So that sort of makes you understand that where your priorities lie in terms of what you're going to be developing in your product or service. The next is user stories versus user and customer journey. So it's usually something that people get confused with, because it's user stories, user journey. It's kind of like the same thing, but it's slightly different, where user stories is more about a specific task of a user within a certain application. So for example, I'm looking to share my profile picture with a friend, for example. So this is essentially a story. There's a certain requirement there, and that essentially is what user stories are. It's within the app. It's what the user is going to be doing when they're using the app, and very much oriented to their behavior, their thought, how are they feeling about this particular task, how are they doing this, all within the app. However, user and customer journeys are more overall. It's more of a bird's eye view. As I said in the beginning, it's about what happens before they use the app, what happens after they use the app, what happens within using the app. So all of it encompassed together. That's essentially what user and customer journeys are. That's the difference between both of them, essentially. And the last is service blueprints. I'm just introducing this in between so that you know why service blueprints are sort of important as well to look at. Many a times it's ignored, but it's very important to look at service blueprinting as well. So it's more about mapping the internal processes of the service provider, in this case the business, trying to see how well they can facilitate giving good user experience. So I'll give you a scenario. It's a medicine delivery company, right? You have an application, you've designed a marvelous app, and the users love using it. It's very easy to find the medicines you're looking for, add that to your cart. Payment's very secure, easy, quick. There's no glitches, there's no lags. They're very happy with that. But once they've placed the order, once that's done, there's a very long delay in delivery, right? Now, the question is, why is there that delay? There's customer service. We're doing that well as well. People are calling us and asking us. There's always someone to give an answer. There's always someone to help them out. However, the delays are just always there. So that's essentially a problem with how the business handles its suppliers, how the business gets its delivery of products to then go and deliver it to the user. So that's an area which needs to be looked at within the company, which indirectly relates to the user, but it's not really a part of their flow or their journey, right? So that's what service blueprinting does. It tells you where the flaws lie within the company, that in some way it's hindering either the customer's journey or the user's journey in some way, and that's where you start fixing that, so it's all very harmonious. So essentially, this is what a customer journey map looks like. You've got a bunch of things that we look at, which is user activities, user goals, and then we've got sections on top, which is awareness, discovery, decision. So if I just go through this briefly, as a researcher, so this individual here is looking for a certain kind of technology that they're interested in. It starts off with awareness. How did they become aware of this? Did they hear about this from a friend, or did they read about this somewhere, see an advertisement? So that's essentially knowing. The next thing is discovery. So they know this exists, The next thing is to go and discover it. It could be you search for this on social media or on Google, or you go looking for this in a certain shop. This could be in the case of a product, or it could be in the case of a service. Once you've seen that, there are certain expectations that are formed that you would think, okay, I think this is going to do this for me. And that would, in a way, facilitate the decision making. And now you've bought it. You're happy with this. You're happy with what you see or what you expect. And now you've bought that. After that comes delivery and onboarding, which I just spoke about. You've bought it, and if it reaches you in time, you're happy. If it's too delayed, you're kind of unhappy. And the last bit is advocacy. Are you satisfied with what you're using? Do you have way too much feedback to give? Or is your feedback positive or is it negative? Things like that. Now, this is the very beginning part, which is user activity. User activity in the context of awareness, discovery, decision, and so on and so forth. But you have to go all the way down as well in terms of user goals. What's the goal of that awareness? What's the touch point for awareness? Or the user expectation at discovery? So mapping each of these blocks out allows us to understand where the gaps are or where the potential for a business model is for the business. So maybe we haven't noticed something, that there is something here that could generate funds for the business. So in a way, this sort of shows where the gaps are in terms of the user's context, as well as where opportunities are for the business, because any gap that exists for the user is an opportunity for a business. So customer journey maps really help with that. And when this particular journey or this map is focused within a product as opposed to the entire journey, it becomes a user journey map. And this is essentially a very elaborate version of a user story. We don't usually do it this way. Typically, it's just, as a user, I want to, so that I can. That's essentially what a user story is. It's always very black and white, text, gray. But many a times, if the time and budget permits, and we've got many stakeholders who are more about crunching numbers, they prefer to see statistics. If you have to present a certain feature to them, that's a user story, right? They might question, why do we need this? We don't see any numbers. What's the use of this? And if you just give them, as a user, I want to, so that, they really would not be interested to hear that, right? So this is a sort of method that we use to get them interested to see what exactly that story is. We do a whole cartoon thing, we walk them through it. So this is mainly done for, as I said, UX is very black and white, shades of gray, but this is mainly done for those where it sort of doesn't work. So this is an example of what that is. Once we have our user stories, customer journey maps, and all of that in place, I'd briefly just go through what information architecture and content strategy is, though it's not really directly related to user experience because it's more of a formalized field now. There are experts to do this in their own field, but it's nice to know this simply because information architecture is very important in terms of information sent. If you have a bunch of features within a website, for example, you have a whole range of products, and sometimes some products may even sort of fall under services, but because you have so many, you've split them, right? You split them as two. What is that information sent that's going to get the user to know that I should be looking within products to find this, as opposed to looking within services to find this, right? So that's essentially where information architecture comes in. It's about the structure of your product or service. How is the user going to navigate through it? Is it easy to understand the language that's being used? So information architecture is pretty much the best thing for content-heavy websites because there's so much content that they have to go through. However, it also applies to those which are moderately low on content because images today might also be content, right? There's not just about text. Now, going into content strategy, that's more about tone and voice of a certain set of content on the website. You might have something which is very instructional, which says, click here and this will happen. It's very instructional, very cold, not personal at all. But I think maybe you guys must have noticed nowadays applications do things like, do you think that you would like to click into this? Why not give it a try? Things like that are more colloquial. They're more comfortable to go through. They're more. It's something that allows you to feel like they are friends, and I would like to be part of this. It's more comfortable, right? So content strategy comes into that as well. It looks into the tone, the voice of your of your brand sometimes as well, the tone and voice of what goes onto your website, what kind of images you would be using. Is it going to be the ones that are very powerful, or is it going to be fun-loving and easygoing, things like that? So that's essentially what content strategy is. As a UX designer, it's nice to be part of those things because those things inform how you're going to be designing your website, for example. What language and what tone are you going to use when you bring users in to each and every task? Because there's always a landing page, there's always a home page, for example. You have to guide them into wherever they're looking to go. So that really helps informing what decisions as the UX designer you're going to make by looking at information architecture, looking at content strategy. In terms of information architecture, I'll briefly go through this method here. So this is something called card sorting. There are different types of card sorting. There's open card sorting, there's closed card sorting, where open card sorting is more, you have a bunch of items. So these things that you see in the list here are just thrown into one massive group. And if it's open, the users are allowed to make their own categories, their own groups. And if any concepts are missing, they're allowed to add those concepts, give their feedback, give their inputs, things like that. However, closed card sorting is essentially what I did for this one here, where I had a bunch of things, bunch of these list items in one group, and I had set titles, so set categories or groups. And these users had to go then put these cards into individual groups based on where they think it fits best. So this is in a way co-creation. So you're using information architecture, you're creating an architecture for your site with the user. And that's really good because you tend to understand how their mind works as opposed to how you think their mind would work. So card sorting is a good way to do that. And once you have, say, results from a few users that you've done this with, you can then start building your sitemap. That's essentially what this is. Your sitemap is built. And from there, you start to sort of build each and every screen out. So this is the last stage of that whole process of fixing or rather identifying who your users are, then giving them personas, giving them a more human aspect or human touch. And then from there, looking at what their goals, motivations are, what's the tone. You've gone through all of that. You've come all the way down to a sitemap. From here, we start to actually build the whole thing. So next thing is user flows. I'll just briefly show you what we can do on Figma with user flows. So we did discuss that we're going to briefly look at how Figma works for these things. Before, it used to be more, there are softwares to do this. However, I personally like FigJam as of now. We've got FigJam here, which is a part of Figma, and it's really fun because it allows you to sort of use these preset structures to make a sort of sitemap. It allows you to use these preset structures to make user stories and user flows and things like that. So I'll quickly make a user flow for you guys using a user story that I've just quickly formulated here. So as a user, I want to see my notifications, right? So what we can do here is just click this one here, which is a sticky note, for example. Get that, copy that, paste that in. So that's essentially what our user story is. The user flow is how is the user going to achieve this task? That's what a user flow is. It's within the app. It's achieving a certain goal, right? So I'm just going to get this box here. I'm just going to place it there. Give it a purple. And I'm going to say they open the app. Click on it. Click a plus. It says tap the notification icon. That's there. You can view the list. And you have two options, which is you either marked it or you dismiss it. Mark red. And you can just do Shift-C, connect it, Shift-C, connect that. So it's very simple. It's not much, but imagine a whole bunch of user stories that are listed out vertically all the way down. And this sort of makes it very easy. Like it's something new that's recently introduced by Figma. I think it's still in beta phase. So if you guys get the chance, I would definitely recommend using this to sort of do your initial thoughts, initial ideation. One of the good thing about FigJam or Figma in general is that you can all work together. So for example, I'm hovering here, you would see Apurva Nair. If somebody else is hovering on the same area or working around you or working with you, and they are part of this project, you can see them hover on the side here as well. You can just open the chat. I think this looks great, for example. So that's just something you can do. You don't have to always, given that remote working is a thing nowadays, given that everything is done online, this really makes it a lot more fun as opposed to you shifting between different platforms, typing in your message there, coming back here. That's pretty much what this sort of facilitates. So that's essentially what user flows were. And what we use as of now is FigJam to do this. After user flows comes wireframing and prototyping. So for this, I'm essentially going to go into Figma. I'm going to create a wireframe. I'm going to show you a bunch of sketches that I've done for the same fitness. It's a fitness app that I'm thinking to use. And for that, I'm just going to briefly show you what sketches I've done, what essentially the process is before you start wireframing, what prototyping is, at what stage do you do it, what's the ideal stage to start user testing, and then finally we're going to go into hi-fi designs. So the first step in wireframing and prototyping is sketching. It's very often overlooked. People just think sketching is not very important. Let's just jump. Let's just leave this and jump. And I say this because a lot of smaller projects with limited time and time constraints, they usually tend to skip this step. However, this is very crucial simply because it's pen and paper. It's less permanent as opposed to making a box on the screen. It always is the case. Even though there's undo, there's ways to quickly delete it. Quickly sketching an idea is a lot easier than it is to build something digitally. So as you see here, this is a method that I use often. It's called Mighty 6. So you might have one screen. It's named menu, it's named statistics, 6 options of the same screen. And the rule is that none of them should look the same. They should all look different no matter what. You can make a bunch of notes around your sketches. And at the end of it, you have this one screen here where you either bring in ideas, different ideas from those 6, or you make one completely new idea. Or you've just liked one design so much, you just made that your final design. So essentially, Mighty 6 allows you to iterate different ideas quickly without having to look at, is this 16 pixels wide and is that 32 pixels tall? It's much easier to do it this way. And I'll just briefly walk through what cognitive walkthrough is before I jump into Figma. So what cognitive walkthrough is, you have to look at a screen and know whether it is clear to the user that this is what they can do on the screen. And I'm presenting it now, which is before wireframes and after sketching, because it can be done on sketching screens as well. It can be done on wireframes as well. So these screens here in sketching, if you see, they've got a certain amount of detail. You can see words like profile and settings. That means you can run cognitive walkthrough on such screens. So what it is there are 4 questions that you have to ask. Is the effect of the current action same as the user goal? So if the user is looking to open up the menu, for example, tapping on the menu, is it really going to bring that menu out? You have answers as yes, no, and why no. You have to have a reason as to why it doesn't work. That's the gap that you have to fill. The next is the action visible? Is this menu icon that you're looking to open hidden? Is it within the profile menu, for example? Or is it very clearly there that they can just tap on it, they can open it? Button or call to action, essentially. So you've got yes and no for that. Then will the user recognize this action as the correct one? So many a times the problem with icons is the hamburger menu is very universally known as the menu icon. But there are many variations to the icon nowadays, some of which even look like filters or list view icons. So going very creative with these icons can sometimes hinder how well it's identified or how well it's labeled, for example, as well. So in those cases, that's the question that you ask. And this question usually works when you've looked at wireframes or semi-high fidelity wireframes. So you know what icons you've used. Do they really work? Is it just you who thinks it's going to work, or is it universally something that works? And the last is, will the user understand feedback? So feedback can be of many kinds, where if you've pressed a button, there's a pressed state for a button. So that just means I've pressed the button. That's feedback. Or it can be you've pressed submit, something's gone through, and there's just nothing, and the user doesn't know what's happening, right? So there's a screen usually that tells you, congratulations, this has been completed, or your account has been created, things like that. So that's feedback. Will they understand that this feedback means something. Another very good example is the play button changing into pause and the other way around. So is this something that the user will understand? And again, in brackets, will they get feedback? That's a very big question. Will they be provided any sort of feedback, right? So see situations which need feedback, see the ones which are automatically understood, make the decision based on what users or what target audience you are looking to sort of cater to. And it's ideally done on core screens of a digital product. As I showed you in the sitemap, we had a whole bunch of screens, and doing this for every screen kind of does not make sense. It has to be done for the most core screens of your product, where that's essentially the bread and butter of your product or service, right? So that's essentially what you do cognitive walkthrough on. And one major thing to keep in mind when you're doing either cognitive walkthrough or heuristic evaluation, which is another way to look at how usable your product is that who are you designing for? And I say that because yes, it's very important to know your target audience and pain points and things like that, absolutely. But in terms of what's their experience with technology, do they have are they very tech savvy, or do they barely use any form of technology? Because there are certain in digital interface languages which are learned over time. So, for example, the very old Nokia phone had OK and menu on either sides. But we sort of got rid of that because now we know that OK and back are just icons now. It's kind of understood. But if it's someone who is of a much older generation and you just present them with this smartphone, they struggle with that, right? That's because they haven't had the time to learn those behaviors. So you need to know who you're designing for in terms of their technical or technological capabilities and how tech savvy they really are, to know that if you're making an assumption that, oh yeah, they will know what the hamburger menu is, will they really know what the hamburger menu is? So that's something you have to really consider when you're designing your screens. So I'm just going to go back to Figma and I'll go into this. So for the wireframes, I was thinking today we could just do 3 screens. It's a fitness app that I'm looking to design here, where the idea is to have a whole world where you can save all the gym workouts you do. You can save any treks that you have done. The idea is to have an all-encompassing fitness app that allows you to put in all your different fitness regimens, not just something that you've built on the app, such as the program or something. But the segment that I'm going to design today is your workout for the week, the workout form. So essentially, if you've got a certain exercise that you're doing, you have to have a certain form to do it. So that's the screen I'm going to be designing, and start workout. So the first step that I did here was sketch out a few ideas. I basically made one which listed them out as cards. I made another one where you can just tap into different sections and you've got a GIF playing in the middle and you've got a massive start button, because that's what it's all about, start, right? And then I've got another one where you've got sort of preview, because some may not know how to do it. They might be new to it, right? So these are different things that come into your mind. You might have somebody who's very used to using fitness apps, and then there might be somebody who is getting into it for the first time. So all of these little things are informed from the user research that is done on that certain project. And then there was just one which is a massive screen. It's just image and a few things left and right. Again, if you're on cognitive walkthrough on that, the question is it clear as to what they're doing? Because many a times UI designs look aesthetically very pleasing, but it's very hard to understand what exactly is happening on the screen, right? So it's nice to put those ideas down, but then you have to really critically evaluate those. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this screen here again, and I'm going to show you a few quick things that we can do on Figma, and then we're going to create one completely new screen. And we're just going to prototype the entire thing now. So how you start with on Figma is you click the frame icon, you choose whichever frame you're looking to build on. So I'm going to say iPhone 11 Pro Max. I'm going to give it a name, which is my workout one because I've already got one here. So if I'm designing this from scratch, I'm just going to go bring in an icon from something called Nucleo. It's an application I use. It's an icon library. So I just go in, I type arrow, I get this arrow here, copy as SVG, and I'll just click on the frame and paste it. That ensures that this icon is pasted within the frame. Because if I just drag this out, that's a frame in itself. And what happens when you have a frame is that it's essentially the most balanced shape of the icon, and you don't want to mess with that. You can ungroup it and make it just an icon, but then now it's this very weirdly shaped horizontal piece, right? And you don't want to do that. So you can, this is basically linking the height and the width of the item. So you link it, say I want it to be 32, for example, and I'm going to bring it back into the frame. One of the first things to know, which I'm going to introduce later, is in UI design is pixel pushing. Everything has to be 23, 31. Basically, it has to be very aligned. But as of now, we're doing wireframes, and that doesn't really matter. So in wireframes, it's all about just chucking in the things to see if it really works or not. That's essentially what it is. So I think as of now, this looks pretty balanced. Let's just go with that. Let's do cardio week 1. Put that here. I think that looks fine. Now we're going to go here, which is the box, or you can just do R, which is rectangle. Bring that here, you hold shift, it will become an equally shaped item. But if you leave shift, you can just change the shape as much as you want. Bring that here, because it should essentially tell you why you are, what your stage is in that particular workout, right? So you've got your entire workout for week 1. This is cardio. Instead of doing weight training or something else, you're doing cardio, and that's for week 1. So it should tell you an overview of what your week 1 is going to look like, right? So I've got here saying beginner, you can have advanced, you can have intermediate. Maybe if you want to make your wireframes look slightly nice, you can always tweak how the corner radius is. You can make it lighter. It does not have to look good. They're just wireframes essentially at the end of the day. Just make that work in terms of having your font there, have your items there. So that's beginner, you've got that there. The next thing that they would want to see on the screen is how long is this workout really going to be, and how many calories they're going to lose, all the exercises that they're going to be doing. Now, for example, instead of creating this myself, because I just showed you how a box is created, how text is added, right? If I've got this done in some other screen, I don't need to make that again. I can just copy it. And given that this is the position of it on this frame, if I click on this frame and paste it, it just comes there. So that makes it really, really easy. You don't have to keep repeating the same step, right? Same goes with these little builds here. Click it, you paste it, and paste it there, and you're pretty much done. So if I'm just going to build a completely new screen to show you guys how the last screen, essentially, that's essentially the screen I'm going to be working and building the wireframe as well as the hi-fi designs on with you guys. So I'm just going to change this one. Make this a 10. And let's make that really massive. Make that 54, for example. There's also a very neat thing that Figma does. It's called Figma Mirror. So when I'm looking at the screen, this may look pretty much okay for me, right? But on the mobile itself, it may look really massive and it may look really bad. So it's always good to sort of select your frame, keep Figma Mirror open, and then see how it looks on the phone as you design. It's live, so as you keep moving these things around, it will move on the phone. It's a good thing to do when you're designing for mobile, given that room for error is very small on mobile phones. So let's bump that up by 4. Oops, I like how that looks. Let's change this to big, make that small, maybe about 14. And we'll bring that here. Right, so it says 10 exercises left, the number of exercises left in that particular workout. We've then got a big box here, maybe make that at 12, and it says that's your next workout. Basically, what we are designing now is that you are on the screen, you're going to view all the workouts for that week. You're going to tap on preview, you're going to be able to see how exactly you do that workout, the form for that workout, and the last is start. So how it looks once you've started the workout, because then you're essentially doing it with the person, right? So this is the screen that we're designing now. So let's go a little lighter here. You can press on I, you can color pick, and that's essentially what my image is going to look like. You click right, front, you have next, and let's make that slightly bigger. And we have our workout name, for example. It's too large. Yeah, I think that works. again, it doesn't matter how this looks as of now. It's very close to this, but the concept comes through. In a wireframe, that's essentially what we're looking to do, right? Let's make a very big image now. Now, when you're within a frame, it will always get chopped off. So you don't have to worry about that. You can go slightly larger. And the idea is to make this sort of look like a panel, but not have the notch. This one is a panel. It's got the drop shadow at the back. It's got the panel notch on top, which you're going to drag up and down. But this one's more of just a UI thing. So instead of having a white or a gray box, you can always choose to make it slightly better if it's a wireframe as well. So say, for example, I'll bring that there. Front, make this larger. And maybe make that 32 or 40. Should be good. Maybe bring that there. 15. So essentially what it does is you've got this live or GIF playing consistently for that particular duration of that workout. You've got the workout name and you've got how many reps you have to do in that workout, in that set essentially. So this says reps and you can go down to 12. Doesn't have to be too big. Now you have those things. Let's move this slightly up. So what's missing here is a way to exit the screen, right? Because we got rid of the back button. There's no way to leave the screen. So the idea is to sort of, when the phone is kept, nobody's going to be holding their phone and working out. It's obviously going to be kept somewhere, right? You have to keep your phone somewhere and then work out. So the idea is to have massive buttons as opposed to then going all the way up to this tiny back button, which they're not going to be doing consciously. When you're working out, that user in that moment would be tired. They're not looking to be precise, right? So we're gonna have massive buttons at the bottom here. One which is a pause, and the other which is a stop. Now, the reason behind having the stop slightly smaller than the pause is because the idea or our goal is to motivate them to sort of finish the workout. That's the reasoning behind this. Finish the workout, so we're asking you to pause it as opposed to stop it. And when they are, say, tired from a workout, the biggest button is what they're going to see first. So we would want it to be pause, something that they may want as well. That would be informed again by user research. And then stop would be the smaller button, because that could be more conscious. Once they've paused it, they've caught their breath or taken a deep breath, and then they can just choose to pause that workout. So let's make this stop. Let's go small, maybe 14 is, I think, too tiny. Let's go center it. That's your stop button. And that's your pause. So that's essentially what your wireframe can look like on a very quick level. It doesn't have to be too fancy. It can be very plain. And if you want, like I had some time yesterday to slightly put a little more effort into the wireframe. And that's when a wireframe looks like this. You can put some more effort and you can make it look good. So this screen is essentially what we're going to be designing in the high fidelity designs as well. And what happens after this stage is prototyping. So if I go back to the presentation, the next stage is to prototype this particular set of wireframes. The reason I'm not doing it on this presentation is because we don't have enough time to go deep into user research and go deep into user testing and things like that. But ideally, you would want to prototype your wireframes so that the number of changes that are made or the feedback that comes is much easier to implement in your designs, as opposed to once you've pushed all the pixels and matched 32 with 32, it is a nightmare to have to change those things and bring in the feedback. And the feedback sort of becomes a heavy task, and you sort of don't like it anymore because you've put so much effort, right? So the best time to do it is on a wireframe when you've just chucked all your elements in. It looks a certain way, it doesn't work, let's just change it. It's great, right? So again, earlier done, the better. It's done on different stages of the feedback, different stages for feedback to prevent incurring very heavy costs and loss. By this, I mean, even though I'm introducing prototyping now, it can be done at the sketching stage as well. So if I just go back to my sketching images. Now, if this were much larger, my D6 is a very small box. If it's a much larger box, you can choose to just cut out that thing and use it as a paper prototype. So you might say, this is my menu. If I click on this, and if I tap on about, you might just tap your finger on the image or on that paper, and you can bring in about. So that's paper prototyping. It's very good at the very start to just use your rough sketches and sort of see how that works. Does it work or will it work, right? So that's one of the most rough ways to prototype something. The second is you've got digital prototypes where you've got a wireframe, you've linked a bunch of items, see if it works, see if it can do a good job or not. Now, when I say rough, there are ways to have transitions on Figma where if you can ease in things, you can ease out things, you can decide how slow it transitions in or how fast it transitions in. Those are not things we're looking at when it's a wireframe. We're just looking to jump between screens because it needs to work. It needs to see, the users need to see whether this is doing what we want it to do, right? Once you go into hi-fi designs, it's nice to look at those things because now we're looking at everything. The experience of how it works, the usability is there, and now we're trying to make it look good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back into Figma and we are going to design some hi-fi designs for these. And then we're just going to prototype the whole thing. And we're going to quickly see how that works, right? So the first thing you need to consider when you start off with interface design is your color palette. You need to know what's your palette in terms of if you have a brand, it needs to be cohesive with the brand. If it's, say, for example, an app for food, you cannot have a green and or maybe I would say green is a good color to have for food. Maybe you can't have, say, a dark black and white and gray and monotone, very Netflix kind of combination for food, because food has to be green, it has to be inviting, it has to be something that makes you feel hungry when you look at it. It's got to complement the images of food that you're going to use on the website, right? Or on the mobile app. So color palette is very important. When you build a color palette for the brand, it should also be very all-encompassing. So say, for example, if my color palette for this brief brand that I just made here quickly is green and red, and if I just stopped at shades of that, it would have looked too overwhelming. But you need to have a few neutral shades, which just wash out everything else so that the parts that you want standing out is going to stand out. So once you have your color palette ready, you need to decide what's your icon style going to be. So there's something called Schneiderman's 8 rules of UI design. It's good to look that up if you're ever looking to do UI design. And one of the things in that is consistency. Now, you might have, say, for example, I'll just show you on Nuclear what the difference is. So I have a filter icon, for example. If I'm looking at an outline icon, this is what I'm going to get. But if I don't maintain consistency and I just say, let's go for a glyph icon, having something like this next to something like this is going to be very odd, because even though it's the same icon, and I would never use the same icon together, but if you have a menu icon that's line and you have a filter icon that's glyph, it already does not look the same. It doesn't look consistent, right? It's also very important to look at the type of icon you're choosing, where if you see this one has more rounded edges as opposed to this one having more sharp edges. So you really have to go into the detail of the kind of icons that you are using. If it's very sharp, if it's rounded, all have to be consistently rounded. If it's all very chunky icons, even though it's line, they should all be chunky icons. It should not be one slim line and one's very chunky. That would be odd. And then the last thing, or I would say one of the other things, is buttons. It's very important to know what buttons you're going to be using or how you're going to be using them in terms of visual hierarchy. So you should know what your primary buttons are, what the secondary is going to look like, and what the tertiary is going to look like. Because if they all look like the primary, the user doesn't know where to tap. They all look primary. They want to tap everything, right? But that's not what we're looking for. So if you've got a screen and you've got, as I said, a stop and a pause, I want them to see pause, right? So that's going to be the big one. And I'm going to probably make stop as a secondary button. However, there are many other screens, which, say, for example, I have a bunch of workouts and I'm looking for a single workout filter. Filter does not have to be one which is fill or ghost. This is called the ghost button. You don't need to have one of these massive chunky buttons on the screen. You can just have one which is text. Or if you are choosing an icon, I would say proceed with caution, because you need to use icons which are very commonly known. If this one is considered to be a very commonly known icon in your target audience, then by all means, please use that one. Otherwise, be sure that you're using icons that they know. Yes, granted that there is an assumption that it's just the first time thing. They will learn it. The idea of UX is to make it as natural as possible, as opposed to have them to learn something, right? So that's one of the things that you have to look at. Even as a UI designer, it's good to know that. And as a bottom line, just to say, most UX designers should know UI design, because it kind of goes hand in hand. But at times, a lot of UI designers don't practice UX design. And I believe that they both should go hand in hand, because if one doesn't complement the other, there's always a gap that needs to be filled, and that wouldn't work out really well, right? Going into the hi-fi design now. So we can just essentially start putting things into the screens. But before I do that, I just wanted to quickly walk through a few quick, neat things that Figma does, basically. So I've got this grid here. I can just click on my frame. I can add a grid. I can choose to go, I want an 8, actually not a grid, I want a column, and I want 8 column grid, right? And I want my margins to be 32. It's good to have a 32 margin, simply because there are some phones that curve on the side. You don't want your data curving, your image or your UI design curving off the sides if you've got buttons on the sides, right? So it's nice to have like a 32 pixel margin, an 8 count, and then essentially try to fit everything within that margin. Now I've made these slightly outside margin. So you can see how they go. This one goes outside the 32 pixel mark, but this one's within that. Now, if I switch off the grids on both of these, automatically this one looks a lot more to the edge, much more wider, as opposed to this looking a lot more balanced. So that's the benefit essentially of having a column grid and using that when you're designing. As I showed before, I don't need to be replacing everything. It's very easy on Figma. You can just copy this, you can delete that and paste that there, and you're done with that. Now, in terms of this here, so I've got this button. They're all buttons. I want to be able to tap into each one of them, and I want this area here to change. If I have to make this manually on every screen, it's a big pain, because what if I change the style of this? What if I make this, say, for example, green? It's going to be a task to have to change it across everywhere. So what we do in Figma is we make master components where, say, for example, I get this one out. And say, for example, I'll detach this instance for now. So you've got this as your master component, and you've got another one which does not have any of these sort of outlines, because it's the inactive state. So basically, as I see here, active state, and you've got inactive state. So I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to make that solid and get rid of the stroke. I'm just going to make this the font color. So that's my inactive state, right? What I can do to make this a component is you tap on this one, you click on component. It's very important to organize your components, otherwise it's not easy to sort of access them. So now this one is automatically becoming exercise active, is because I pulled it from that. However, if it's a completely new component, make sure to tap into that and then change the name it exercise active or exercise inactive. And that's essentially how you have these two states. Now, what happens with that is, say, for example, I'm here, and the next screen is me shifting to exercise 2. I don't have to copy that, paste this into place, again do the margins and the spacing between two of them. I can just tap into that, which is this here. I can go into active and switch that to inactive state, and it's just done. I don't have to really worry about doing that multiple times everywhere. And if I ever make a change to my master component, so for example, I go here and I change this to fit app green, it would just change as fit app green over there. I'm not sure why it's not changing here. Is that a component? Where's the active one? Or maybe I've manually changed it here. Sorry, I'm not able to see. I'm not able to know why that's not changing there. It should ideally. Anyway, but that's essentially what it does. Having components allows you to change the state and size of things across. Now, I've got this button here. I quite a bit experimented with the size of this. So if I'm on this button here, again, I can just choose to change the color of this to that, and it would just shift across all the child components of that master component. Now, in terms of auto layout, one of the things that really is good about auto layout is, say, for example, I have a button, right? I've got this really massive button. Let's make that really round. And let's make that black. Let's have some text on it. This is my button. Bring that on top, make that white, and let's center it, right? So if I just grouped this button, and if my button, say, for example, became smaller, preview. Oops. Now I have all the space on the side left, which I have to then manually resize, which is a lot of hassle if you have to do it repeatedly. So what you can do is you can just click on auto layout. It becomes a frame. You can have this either go downwards or sideways. And essentially what that does is if I add an icon, it will either add horizontally or it would add vertically. So this here is set to vertically. This one is set to horizontally, right? So you've got your horizontal alignment. You've got this here, and I want everything to go from the left side. I've got 80 pixels wide on each side. I feel that's too much. So I'm just going to go 32, 32. Let's make this 14 and 14. If I'm happy with how this button looks. Now, if I go, this button is too big, and it will just essentially resize to that size. And I don't have to constantly fix the size of my button everywhere and then balance it everywhere. So that's really cool. So what I've done is I've made these here. I've made my master components here. All of that works really well. And what I did is I made an auto layout card. An auto layout card is essentially the same thing. So if I'm going to have a massive image here, make that 12. It's really good to use plugins on Figma, so I don't have to go in somewhere, copy the image, bring it back in. Let's go to plugins, go to Unsplash. Right. Oops. Go to search, maybe workout, and say I really like this image. Click it. It comes in there. I'm just going to have a white box here, which is, say, 12. I'm going to put some text here, which is battle ropes, for example. We've got that there. Put some text below that. Now, because this is my main title, I'm just going to make it slightly large. Now, this is essentially what visual hierarchy means. You have to play with the weight of your font. You have to play with the size of your font, the color of your font, to make sure that it looks like the title and the other bit looks like the subheading or something like that. So we've got battle ropes here. We've got something else that says maybe 15 reps. 2 sets. And as of now, they both look equally heavy, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make that 14. I'm going to reduce that in weight. So now it looks like it's the subheader to that. If I just select the both of them, I give them auto layout. And what I do is the space between them is, say, 4. So basically, I want to set the space between these two as 4. Now, why I set that as 4 is because one of the other things to know is across your designs, it's nice to maintain all your pixels in multiples of 2. So 2, 4, 32, 48. It's really good to go in that multiple count because it's much easier in terms of development as well. So that's something we learn over time, where when we design something and it doesn't really work for the developers, they come back and say, this is so hard to do. So if we work in cohesiveness with their library, so for example, as of now, the team that I work with uses Tailwind CSS, and they have certain rem sizes for things, which I had no clue of what rem sizes was. And they asked me to follow this guideline rule. So I said, okay, I'll do that. Doing that has made it a lot easier for them. Now they use a library called React icons. So it's very good to know that if you've just dragged in an icon and placed it there, it's much harder work to get that image placed in by them. So what happens is if you can find a matching icon in their library, it is a little extra work for UI designers this way when you're doing it that way, but it sort of overall helps development time, where if you put this in the right way, it gets developed the right way, and it's not an image that can break when it's an image of an icon that will break when it's used on the design, when it's developed. So these are a few things to keep in mind when you're designing. Now, if you've got this here, click auto layout again. It's already got a certain structure fixed, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make that there. We've got, again, it's 13, 13. As I said, multiples of 2. So let's just go 16. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. Let's just go 16 and 16. And let's go 32 and 32. So if I want this to stay fixed, for example, as of now, it says hug contents. So if I say battle ropes and something, it's just going to keep enlarging. It's going to get getting longer. It might go outside the card. I'm not looking for that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this frame and I'm going to say, that's packed. Oops, sorry. I'm just going to say fixed width. So if I say battle ropes, something, oops, I'm supposed to go the other way down. And this would be fixed width, battle ropes, something else. So what happens is it sort of enters. So I fixed the width of my text field. I fixed the width of my outside bounding container, and now it will just grow vertically. That way I'm not bothered about how much horizontal space it takes. So that's another easy way to create these auto layout cards. That's exactly what I did here, and that's what I pasted into the space. Now, in terms of prototyping it, which I'll get to in a bit. So what we'll do now is we've got our first screen here, which is the workout for the week. The user can swipe horizontally to view it. It will then change these title elements, or they can just choose to tap into exercise 1, exercise 2, and they can view that. If they tap on preview, it should bring up this panel, and that's when they can see how that workout is done. And the last is start workout, which we just made as a wireframe. So let's quickly mock that up as a hi-fi design. I like to keep it as a reference point on the side so I know exactly what I'm designing. Let's just bring a copy of this. Most of the times what I do is instead of having to make a whole new screen, I just bring it in and I just start designing on that. It's more about how you use it essentially. So let's go back. Let's rename this to start workout. It's nice to have names to your screens because otherwise you get really confused as to which screen you're looking at and what you're working with. So let's make this a form because that's what it is, right? Let's bring this in. And now we're going to start looking at margins and padding and what's the size of each of them. So if you press Alt and you just hover, it will tell you how far that thing is from the margin or from the corner. So it says 28 and 17. Now across all of these, I've maintained 24, 24, right? So let's just, to make things easier for me, go to Layout Grid, go to Columns, go to 8 and margin 32. We need to fix this one because this was the one I intentionally did wrong to show you guys how that looks. But for now, let's keep this here. So that's 32, 19. Let's go 20. We've got a notch. Okay, so since we've chosen iPhone Max, we've got the notch on top. So that's something you have to consider if you're designing for devices that may have things like a notch or something which does not have that, or you've got the punch hole, which is something new as well. So you have to keep those things in mind when you're designing. So this is something I saw when I was doing that yesterday. So say 51, let's do 52. And 52, let's do sizes left, oops. Let's bring that here. Let's make that 12. And the distance between these two is 0. So I'm just going to set that to 4. So that I like how that looks. I'm not sure about it like that. Let's make that 2. And group it so it sits in the middle. Again, that line tells you where I am. Sits in the middle. I'd like to touch that column. So it's 3, 4. Group it. That's your element on that side. Let's just get the same height going here. Let's set that to 12 because that's what we've used across. And make that height, say 56. And let's use this color, right, that we've been using at 8%. There we go. Let's just bring in these elements here into this. It's all about how you choose to work with the software. There are many ways to do each and everything. It's basically what I've learned over time. Just got comfortable doing it. And there are many more things that Figma sort of allows you to do, but this is the most basic version of that. Oops, can't spell. Okay, so let's go small on this one. Now again, the reason I'm going to go small on next and big on workout name is because workout name is the main thing as opposed to next. Next is more just to indicate what's coming after, right? So I want this to be longer. I want this to be much smaller because it's too massive as of now. Let's make that 12. And let's make that 2. Bring this to the side here. So we've got 12 on top. We've got 20 on the side. And I'd like to make that 5. 24, 12. So what is that? That's 14. Make this one small. We'll make that 12. And we'll make this massive. So then it looks like Next, workout name, because that's what we're going to be focusing on. That's too big. Let's go that way. Yeah, that's good. And then we have with the image of the workout itself. Let's just make that 12. Let's do some 8. And we've got 8. We've got that one there. Right. Now this is done. Now we've got the margin set. So what you can do is you can switch off your grids. Now that you know how this looks, you can just bring this slightly lower so it matches. And then we're just going to have a very large image here. Goes all the way down. Make that maybe 32. Go back to Unsplash. And let's just look for that workout image that we have on the left side. Where was that? Right, there we are. Oh, I don't know why that didn't come in. Figma's choosing to act up today. Okay. Come on, Figma. There we are. Okay, so that's your massive image. Again, consistency is important, right? So what we're going to do is, given that this one here has a shadow, and consistently we've shown that the ones with the shadow are interactable elements, where this one can be slid, this one can be tapped on. We're not going to use a shadow for this one because we don't want this to look tappable, right? So we're just going to leave this as is, as we did here as well. There's no drop shadow to that. And we're going to have a very massive text below that says workout name. It's very rough. UI design usually takes a lot more time than this. So let's just call this high knees with jump. That's really large, so I'll make that slightly smaller. High knees with jump, 28. That looks fine. I think that looks good. You can go slightly closer if you want, and you have a line which I have used here before. It's best to use the same lines everywhere as opposed to using them differently. It's nice to reuse elements from across screens. Usually this is why we make components. That way we can just use that, and if it changes across, it works. But because I'm being slightly quick now, I'm not going to make that as a component for this session. Got that there. And we've got this here as 15. This is going to be, say, 32. Let's make that massive. Even bigger, maybe. Yeah, so that's going to tell them they've got 15 repetitions to do in this. That's really big. So let's make that smaller. Okay, there we are. And I think that looks fine, right? I think that looks good. Let's just group this. There are 32 here. And the last is obviously our buttons. So instead of making new ones, I'm just going to grab these two. I'm going to place it here because, again, that's is that? It is, yeah. It is one of my components. And I'm going to match this again in terms of size. That's 16. I'm going to go slightly above. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And that makes it 24. 24 is good. And now we're going to name this stop. And we're going to name this pause the workout. Oops. Let me use character. Pause workout. Now the icons need to obviously match that. So let's go into new Clio. Let's type stop. And we've got this here. So what you can do is go into this, paste it, oops, go into this and paste it. I don't understand why that's happening. Sorry about that. It's supposed to enter into this, and I'm not sure why it's not doing that. Oh God. I'm gonna group that. Maybe detach it. Okay, and then put that in. There we go. Delete that one. And as you see, what I just did was I placed it in, and because it was set to horizontal, it just goes horizontally. If I go all the way there, that's my stop. I'm going to go here and just select the swatch, oops, for my stroke. And make that the teal. That's another thing. So for example, I have a gradient, and I want to have red here, and I want to make that a linear gradient. So I'm just going to make this slightly darker, make this like that at full opacity. I like how this gradient looks, for example. Just go into swatches. Just go, oops. Yeah, go in here and add it. You can just add it as a swatch. Give it a name, and that would essentially be something you can use across your app. You don't have to constantly pick the color up and below and then figure it out. This will just allow you to add it as a swatch and apply it across the entire app. Now, if we go pause, let's just go here. Copy SVG, attach that quickly, put that there, delete this, and let's make this white. It's too big, right? It's too big. So let's check what the size of this icon is. It's 20 and 20. Let's make that smaller. That works. And let's make this smaller as well. I think those 20, it will just become smaller together. Now they're too far apart, right? So we're going to have to sort of remove that button stroke, but it's going to become that way. So let's just do maybe 50%. Let's do less, maybe 80%. Yeah, that sort of works. So here we are. We've got this at 12. Group it, then make it in the middle. And that's essentially what our screen looks like. And that's what the wireframe used to look like. So I'm going to get rid of this. And let's just quickly prototype this. I'll just add another workout image there because we don't want to leave that as a wireframe square. That doesn't look good. Workout. Somehow found that somewhere here. You know what? Let's just take this for now. It's fine. I'll just call this yoga or something. It's really not the right word, but there we are. We're doing that. Okay, so in terms of going into prototyping itself, so what you do is you click prototype. You have this icon here which says where the prototype is going to start. If I move this here, it would start at the screen. This would be my starting point. So it sits here. First thing I want to do is be able to drag this. I want to be able to drag it left and drag it right. So there are different ways to do it where you can horizontally scroll within a certain frame. So I'll show you how I set that. So I've got this entire frame going all the way outside the screen. So I'm going to click on clip content. I'm going to clip it all the way to the edge. Clip content, clip it all the way to the edge. Go into prototype, click this as a frame and say horizontal scrolling, which sort of allows me to scroll between them. I don't know. Oh, right. Okay. Horizontal scrolling, and then this one has horizontal scrolling as well. Once you've done that, the other thing is, again, like I said, I want to swipe left, I want to swipe right, and I want to move between these two screens. So I've got my two screens within the same frame. And one good thing about Figma is that if this frame is named frame 15, and this name, the other frame is also named frame 15, there's something called Smart Animate. So Figma sort of does the job for you as opposed to you having to assign things individually. I'll show you what I mean by that. So you click prototype, you assign this to that on drag, and you click on Smart Animate. So that's essentially leaving all the work to Figma, and Figma will just do it. And say I want that to go 500, and we'll just ease it out when I do it, right? The other thing I want to do is I want to be able to tap onto this, onto exercise 2, and also jump into that, not just swipe. So I'll do this, I'll connect to the other one, on tap, Smart Animate. Again, that one's good as well. What's the other thing? This one is to bring up the preview. So I'm going to double click preview. I'm going to connect it here to this one and say on tap, Smart Animate. Let's make that 700 milliseconds. I think that's good. We'll ease out. Yeah, that's good. And then once I want to drag this, once it's up, I want to drag it back down as opposed to tap because it's a panel. So I'll click on that one, and it already has that re-put in. So I'll just, oops, I'm just going to delete that to show you how it's done. Click this, you drag it back to the original screen. You do on drag, and it would just drag down. Again, Smart Animate. Always remember to do Smart Animate. It's very important to do that. And then once you have this here, I think instead of Smart Animate, it would be smart to just be instant. Or let's see how that works. It's all trial and error to see how it works on the prototype, right? Now, when we do start workout, for example, that should then go in here and it would, instead of smart animate, let's just do dissolve on this one, right? And then if we do stop workout, it should bring us back to the screen. And then again, let's just do dissolve on this. So let's just see how this works, and we can make changes accordingly, right? You click on play, it will open up in a new tab. You have your phone. I already have that open. So one of the first things we said is we want to swipe between these two. And now that's what we can do. Now see, if you see, I can't go back because I forgot to connect it there. So this is how you find out that you haven't done it. You take it, you drag it back, on drag, and it would just allow you to do it. It automatically refreshes there, and I can start doing it. So I can drag horizontally here, and you see this switches because Figma does all the math on its own. I can click on this, and it would still do the same thing. I can go back here, click on preview. I've said it should be at 700, so it came up really slow. I can then choose to drag this up and down, drag it off the screen. That works. If I click on start workout, it just appears in because I don't want things moving around if I did smart animate. I'll show you what I mean by that. If I did smart animate here and went back and say I did a preview here, oops, sorry, let's start workout. It sort of does a certain thing. Like it's when it appears, there's less elements showing in individually. When it just appears in, it's much cleaner because we haven't done detailed animation to this. So as of now, it's good. We'll just keep this like this. You stop it, you go back here, and that's essentially a quick version of the prototype. I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and that's essentially the end of this prototype. I'm just going to go back to the presentation, and this is where we were at. We just completed user interface design, and once we have the prototype ready, one of the good things about having a high fidelity design with prototyping is good to send it out to stakeholders and present it to them for their feedback. Again, they are not people who enjoy black and white, monochromatic wireframes. So it's nice to do hi-fi designs at that level because you've done your research before, you've done feedback on and user testing on wireframes. You've come to a point where you know how it's supposed to work. Now you've taken up these designs, you've connected them up and sent them to stakeholders. That way you don't waste much time on development cost because it's not easy to develop an entire system and then go back and say, this doesn't work, we have to change the whole thing. It's a nightmare. So this really works well if you do it in the right order. And at the end of it, just as one little bit of advice, people ignore design that ignores people. It's really good to keep in mind that every user counts. You have to be all inclusive when you think of users. There are disabilities that you have to think about. There are shortcomings that you have to think about. There are very real problems that you have to think about in your design. Every user on your target audience matters. If they are your primary users, you have to think about them and balance those needs with the business goals, business requirements. It's not just either or, it's always that fine line between the two that you have to sort of walk on. And with that, thank you. Thank you guys. I really hope you enjoyed this session here, and hopefully you learned something. And hopefully if you were following and if it was not too fast, maybe you guys have a prototype with you guys as well. So that's me. Any questions at the end of it? So how most portfolios, how should I start and what do you recommend I make my portfolio on? So if you want to start applying for UI designer jobs, it's one of the things that I did at least was I took up a quick 1 month course. There are a few ways you can do this. 1 month course that gives you one project to work on. It gives you peer evaluation. So invariably you have a brief to work on. This is the problem. You never know where to start from because you don't have a brief to work on, right? So this kind of 1 month crash course gives you an idea of what to work with. So you could do that, or you could go on to any of these freelancing websites. Like you have freelancer.com, you have Toptal, you have Upwork. All of these websites are filled with briefs that you can just pick and choose from that you enjoy doing. Pick that and make that a UI design if you want. You don't have to do the job for them. You can just take that as a brief and you can start to work on that. Apply your own assumptions and presumptions. Again, if you're not doing user research or UX design, if you're just looking at UI, don't worry about how this is going to work. You're trying to make it look good. That's your job. You're trying to make it look enticing for the user to get in, to use that website. Do keep in mind a few things of UX as well, but you don't have to jump into user research is what I'm trying to say. Get your color theory right, get your typography choices right. Those are the things that you need to build on first. Start building your portfolio based on these briefs. Say have about 3 to 4 really good UI designs, and by that I don't mean one screen. Try to have a few screens in each, because that shows consistency. UI design, as I said, it has to look consistent, it has to look cohesive. So break it down. When you make your website, have 3-4 screens that will show how you can visualize that particular interface to look across different types of screens. So when I say that, try thinking of maybe an about screen, which has text and maybe a massive hero image. Try thinking of another one, which is services and products. So you have these grid views coming in. Think of contact us, which is a form. Form design is very important as well. So think of these variety of designs, right? Make that one of your projects. Have about 3-4 projects of this sort. And once that's done, how should I start applying? Okay, so how do I start? Okay, so you could make your portfolio on Adobe Portfolio. That's where I started from. It's very basic, very simple. I had my stuff on Behance, and I just linked it to Portfolio, and I just put everything in there is what I've done. However, I am looking to change it into Squarespace or something else. So why I say this is because if you are looking to have just a portfolio that presents your work, just shows what you've done, Adobe Portfolio is great. But if you're looking at having other streams of your passions showing on it, if you like to draw something, that should show on it. If you have a very nice about screen, if you have a blog, portfolio is not going to be your best choice. So it's nice to look at maybe Wix.com, that Wix website builder that lets you build your portfolio. It's really good to look at Squarespace as well, but that's a lot more work. So evaluate how much time you have, evaluate how much work it's going to take, because if UI design is something that you're just starting with, don't waste your time on that. Put all your energy into building your portfolio, your designs essentially, and then just put them on an easy portfolio. If you have your designs ready, you already know what you're doing, then I would say put some effort and make this, because this time investment is a long-term investment. It's really good to sort of have it built somewhere, which is good. Wireframe and prototype. So wireframes are essentially static. Wireframes can be sketches. Wireframes can be black and white boxes put on a screen, all of that, but it doesn't work. It's just screens. A prototype is usually something that mimics the final outcome. That's the meaning of the word, right? So when you have this clicking through and animations coming in and transitions coming in, it's mimicking the vision of the final product. That essentially is a prototype. And a prototype can apply to black and white wireframes or shades of gray wireframes. It can also apply to mockups or hi-fi designs. But if it works, it's a prototype. If it's just a screen, which is rough, which is not final, and it doesn't have all the micro names and micro information on it, that's then a wireframe. That's what a wireframe is. Where do you go for UX inspiration? I'm not sure if I go for UX inspiration. It's more, I go for UI inspiration. Lots of stuff that's done out there is inspiration for UI, but UX is more about what's the best way to do it. That's essentially, if that's, I'm not sure if that's what you meant by inspiration, but that's what I do. If there's a problem that I'm faced with, and there are best practices in the market that are best ways to solve a certain problem, which is very common, and I'm not sure which is the best way to do it, I would just put that in as a problem and Google it for the first step, where you make that assumption, is this going to work? So at that point, I would just say, what's the best way to do this? I will look at that solution. I will look at who I'm designing it for and see, with their capabilities, with where they come from, with their demographic, their psychographic, and things like that, is it really going to work for them or not? And if I think it works, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to use it and then test it with them. Test it with one of my users and see, does it really work for you? How I thought it's going to work, does it work the same way for you? So UX is more about hard facts. UX is more about seeing the ideal, looking for ideal solutions to existing problems. And UI is more about looking for creative inspiration to make it look good. Yes, there's creativity in UX in terms of how you solve the problem. So that's the side for UX. Did you need programming skills, HTML? Not at all. None of it. I don't know the H in HTML, to be very honest. So none of it's required for UI design. UI design is knowing Figma, knowing Adobe XD. You can even do it on Azure RP Pro, but that's really difficult to learn as a software. So I would definitely recommend Figma or XD. They're really good. You just need to know color theory. You need to know typography. You need to understand visual hierarchy. You need to know Snyderman's 8 golden rules of good UI design. That is your golden 8 rules that you should follow. And I think that's pretty much it. You don't need to know anything in HTML, CSS. And given how powerful Figma and things like that is now, it's so easy to create a prototype. If you're not looking to go into development and coding, if you're just looking to be in UI, I didn't need any, and it's fine. It's worked for me. If I want to get into UX, UI, I have 4 to 5 years of experience in design. What design do you have experience in? So I'm assuming that you must have done some sort of communication or visual or print packaging kind of design. I'm not sure. It wouldn't be UX UI. I'm assuming it would be other streams of design. So if you're looking into UX and UI design, you have to know which one you're getting into primarily, because they're both, even though they go hand in hand, it's very important to know which side you fall on, which is why at the very start I said I lean more towards UX as opposed to UI, because if you're doing UI design, and yes, it's great, it's good to be a UX UI both together, but if you're going to be a UX designer primarily and also a UI designer, there are many things that you need to know in terms of research, in terms of how you're going to be conducting interviews, surveys, and things like that. So it's good to look for courses that really help you understand how this sort of flows. You can always be self-taught. There's a lot out there, a lot of material that you can learn. But from personal experience, I would say that it's always nice to start with a crash course, simply because that gives you keywords to search. It introduces you to terms that you don't even know exists. And that's where the whole branch of research can start from. So it's nice to do a quick crash course if UX is what you're looking for. And on the side, learn UI, read these articles. It's great because you're also looking to do UI, and vice versa. If you're trying to be a main UI designer, but you're also interested in a bit of UX, it's always good to start with the crash courses, is what I would say. Which have my artwork, but the other work is that good. And the other work is that good. Well, I do that, and a lot of people say that that's not how you should do it. You should not have multiple streams of work on the same website, is what I've been told. However, I've also heard that when recruiters, say for example, are looking to recruit you, it's nice to sort of show them that you have other interests as well, that you're not just a UI designer or just a UX designer. You are this individual who does all these wonderful things, and you have all these varied interests. So you're kind of like an all-rounder, which is nice to show. So it's more about perception, is what I would say. Perception in terms of how you look at it, not as opposed to how they perceive your portfolio having multiple streams of skill showing on. If you feel comfortable, if you feel like whatever else you have on your website complements you and your primary line of work, by all means, you should have it, because you have to feel comfortable with it. If it's in no way complementing what you have primarily, then maybe you should reconsider having it on your website. Awesome. Thank you. Really happy to hear that.
Cool. I think those are all the questions we had.
Awesome.
I've dropped your LinkedIn and I've just put it on the screen right now.
Awesome.
So if you guys have any questions after the event, I'm sure you can contact Approval online
Cool.
and network. But I want to say thank you so much for talking today. It's been great. I found it really interesting. I know some of the core team are watching on YouTube right now, and we have like a graphic designer who always uses Figma, and she was like learning so much from just watching you.
Awesome.
So it's been great. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So thank you all for attending. I'm just gonna add this back to the screen. I hope you've had really a lot of fun at this event. The plan is now that we will try and host a few more events. As the restrictions are sort of loosening, we're going to try and see if we can have an in-person event soon towards the end of this month. We have a ton of merch to give away to you guys. So we're hoping that event will be perfect for that. But I want to thank you all for attending today. Please let us know for our social medias and anything, for our WhatsApp, our Instagram, for emailing us what sort of event you want to see next. We have a ton of time now. We can, contact people and get some guest speakers in. We can start doing some more advanced stuff. And we really want to hear what you want to do. But like I said, I want to thank you all for attending today, and I'll see you at the next event. Thanks.